This video I'm going to be talking about the drywall sander I just purchased. Previous video talking about drywall tools. I had just gotten it, hadn't even used it yet, and I said I'd make another video about it after I'd used it and could form some reasonable opinions about it. It's a WEN or WEN drywall sander. It comes with two heads. You got the round head here, and it comes with a triangular head like this. I paid $165 from HomeDepot.com, and give you a picture of the box. So WEN or WEN drywall sander. It comes with this extension wand, which would fit into the handle. Flip this around right here, so you can use it. This is the vacuum hose. You can use it in this configuration here, which would be a short reach sander, or you can unscrew this. It's a tension fitting. Pull out the vacuum attachment, vacuum hose, and then insert the handle, and it goes in like that, and then tighten it down by screwing this fitting back down until it's tight, and of course it's adjustable. Says that that's the maximum right there. There's a marking right here on the handle. And I'd say you've got about, well, I don't have to say, I can measure this and let you know how much reach approximately you've got with the extension in it. Basically 4.5 feet, 4 feet 7 inches, and if you take into consideration all the way down to the head, basically 5 feet of reach. So a normal person can use this to easily sand 8-foot ceilings. Put this here, and then just like in the regular handle, you stick your vacuum attachment down in there and tighten it down, such as this. There's a ring here on the actual vacuum attachment, and what it's for, if I can get this in frame, is to adjust your suction. So it's got a little port there. You line the holes up and it opens the port, and it reduces the amount of suction this thing takes from the vacuum, where you can close it to increase your suction. And that's kind of important to keep in mind when you're running your vacuum. If it starts to smell like burnt insulation, chances are you probably need to clean your filter or change your vacuum bag out. But it may be too much work for the vacuum to take a full suction on this, so you open that up and it allows air in there to keep the vacuum from working too hard. This hose comes set up for 1.25 inch shop vac, and I've got a larger shop vac. It's 18 gallon, and my hose is 2.5 inches, and I couldn't find an adapter locally for this So all I do is I stick it in the 2.5 inch hose. It fits down inside, and I duct tape it for right now until I get an adapter. Going further into the different parts of the vacuum. Here's the on-off switch. It's not plugged in right now. Right there, it locks on the on position, and shut it off, you just push on the back of it and it automatically releases. This dial here is speed control. All the way back is the slowest setting, and then you dial it forward to increase the speed of the head. Like I said, this is the triangular one. This is more for sanding into edges, and you can use it for flat work as well. The heads are fairly easy to change. There's a knob right here. Let me get this closer. And in frame, right there, there's a knob. You pull it up, pull it back, and the head slides off, such as this. There's these little plastic gear covers right here, and they're a consumable item. In other words, what that means is that this will wear out, and it's more to prevent from metal to metal contact in here, because it fits, this little gear plastic piece fits in there, and you use this to mesh into that port right there, and like I said, it is a consumable item. They wear out. It's better to wear out plastic than to wear out your gears, and then basically if you wear the gear out on this or inside of this, it's no good. It comes with extra plastic gear covers or converters, whatever you want to call them, along the back edge here, and eventually you will run out and you'll have to buy more. But there's 2, 4, 6, 7 of them across the back here. And then it is kind of tricky, especially on the triangular sander, to make sure that that plastic gear meshes up with the gear on the sander itself. But once you get it to line up, it'll snap fully into place, and then you just push that locking mechanism. Trying to get a good shot of it here. Push that locking mechanism back up until it snaps into place. The round head for it also has the little plastic, again, out of frame. It's got the little plastic gear cover. This does not have any extras on the sanding head itself. So those 7 that I showed you on the triangular head, that's for both that head and this head. Now what I found is that, first thing, talking about dust collection. The dust collection system works much better on the triangular head than it does on the round head. And I think there's a few different causes for that. Number one, obviously there's more ports in the sanding head itself, and then the corresponding sandpaper. This is hook and loop sandpaper. And on the round head here, this dust collection is not great. So either way, you're going to need to wear a mask, but especially on this sanding head here. And part of the reason for that is, number one, less holes. And the second thing is that this is a rotational head. This will spin 360 degrees like this. So as you're sanding material, most of that material is actually getting thrown out by centrifugal force to the sides, and there is a little brush catcher here, and once you snap this in place, it is supposed to suck air through and dust through from the circumference of the sanding head in theory. In practice, it doesn't work all that well. So as you can see, there's a lot of dust that gets caught in here and gets thrown out beyond this little brush that you see around the outside circumference of the sanding head. The triangular head is more of a vibration sander. I suppose it does move in a circular pattern, but it's very, very tight, and it's more of a vibration sander than it is a disc sander or rotational sander. So the dust collection with this head is a lot better. Now, a couple of things to be said about these different heads. I found that as far as material removal, the round head, you can remove more material with lighter sandpaper. And what I mean by that is that this is 120 grit, and it was removing material really well. And that's kind of standard for me when I'm finishing drywall. And I'm using the quarter sheet palm sandpaper or sander. The paper I usually use is 120 grit. Sometimes I use 100 grit if I've got a lot of material to remove. But 120 grit is a good material or a good sandpaper for me on the palm sander. So I started with 120 grit and with this head, and it worked out well for me. The triangular head, conversely, is again keeping with the mindset that I usually use 120 grit anyway. That's what I started with, and it was super slow removing material. And this sander comes with a variety of different grits of sandpaper, one of each grit for both the round head and the triangular head. So anyway, I started with 120 grit, and it was super slow. So I moved down to 100 grit, still slow. So for lack of any other option, I moved down to the 80 grit, and it was a lot better, but it was still slow for my liking. So I wound up going down to the 60 grit paper, and that gives me a fair amount of removal without taking too much off and letting it run away from me. Run away from me, I mean, take out too much, take off too much mud. One of the things that I did wind up doing is that this vacuum hose, let me get a drink here real quick. The vacuum hose on the head itself, I found it was too long, and what was happening is that when you are working with it, this hose goosenecks, and it actually starts rubbing on, say you're doing a corner, it actually starts rubbing on the opposing side of the corner, and it creates drag, and it makes it harder to move the sander around. So what I did is I took loose this hose clamp right here, and I took about 3 inches off. It's easy to cut, fairly easy to cut, and it's just plastic. The reinforcement rings here, the ridges, they're plastic, so it's fairly easy to cut. So I took about 3 inches off, and as you can see, it's still goosenecks. I don't think I can get it in frame any better. I'm running out of room, but you can see what I'm talking about. They're goosenecks still. I may take off some more, but you want to be careful not to take off too much because when the head is in the laid down position like this, which you would find yourself in that position doing flat sanding. So you don't want to create too much tension on this. I think I can come off maybe another ring or two and still be safe. But I'll probably do that because, like I said, it still rubs when it's in the fully extended position like this. I know the frame's not too great. Let me move the camera back a little bit. So when this is fully extended, you can see the gooseneck there, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Now, if you're sanding on the sides of the triangle sander, it's not an issue. But if you're sanding in the front of the triangle, which I find that's easiest to control, then you're going to have problems with that gooseneck rubbing on the opposing edge. Okay, we talked about some of the differences between the round head and the triangular head here. The other thing I want to talk about is that the round head is actually a lot easier to work with. To the point it stays in contact with the surface easier, especially in overhead when you're sanding in this configuration here where the handle's pointed down and your head is in contact with the drywall. So it's easier to control. This, with the triangular head, it's very back heavy, as you can see, between the vacuum hose actually pushing on it and the weight of the motor being in the back. It takes some effort to keep this in full contact with the drywall because it wants to fall back. This head, I found, you want to be underneath it more. In other words, you want your handle more perpendicular to keep this head in contact. So you know, putting it on the wall, let me make some adjustment here. Or in this case, the ceiling is what I'd rather talk about. You're going to get it up on there, and you're going to want to, you don't want to see my ugly face. And you're going to want to maintain more of a hold, such as being directly underneath it, or as directly as you can get. Being out like this, it has a tendency to want to pivot on that front edge and drop on you because of the push of the hose and the weight of the motor. It's the exact opposite on the round head. The round head, you're going to want to not be quite so directly underneath it because the centrifugal force, see how easy that dropped off? The centrifugal force will want to throw it if you're directly underneath it. Try to get this installed. So you put the round head up there, and you're going to want to stand back from it a little bit. You're not going to want to be underneath it because it's really hard to control. So you want to actually be more of an angle using the sander. And you can see it still wants to kick back on you. So, you know, you've got to apply pressure to it. Now, a couple startup features about this. It's got what's called a soft start system, and that when you turn it on, it doesn't go directly to full speed. I'm going the wrong way with this. It doesn't go directly to full speed. It takes a second for it to come on, and then it slowly builds up speed to whatever speed setting you have. And then speaking of speed settings, what I found works best is that I have it turned down all the way. And then I start it, and when I start it, I actually have it on the material already. I found that you don't want to necessarily start it, get it up to speed, and then try to get it positioned on there, because it's going to start kicking you around. So what I do is I actually put it on the material, you know, lightly, and I start it up. Like I said, I've got it set at the lowest speed, and you'll find that it'll be difficult to hold it on the material, depending on the grit of your paper. The lighter the grit, or I should say the higher the grit, which is less abrasive, the easier it is to use on a lower speed. However, if you've got a aggressive grit on there, then you want to maintain control. Like I said, you're just holding it there lightly, and then adjust your speed until the sander acts right. It stays in place and it's not trying to kick it around. And like I said, it depends on the grit that you're using. So basically, in a nutshell, that's it, with the exception of my impressions. This thing is heavy. It's a workout. There's no two ways about it. So if you get up in the morning and you eat a big bowl of Sweeties instead of Wheaties, this is probably not the machine for you. It's like spending hours in the gym doing military presses and pull-ups. You will definitely feel it the next day, especially in your shoulders. It is quicker than using a quarter sheet palm sander. I'd say it probably took me a quarter to a third of the time to do my sanding with this than with a quarter sheet palm sander. The advantage is that I didn't have my hands up above my head, so it reduced fatigue in that way, but it more than made up for it holding this thing up, especially keeping enough pressure on it to keep the head from tipping. The other thing that I do like about it is that it has a very large sanding area. So what that helps with is if you use a palm sander, a lot of times, let me grab it. A lot of times it'll start tipping on you just from fatigue, not really, your eye fatigue and arm fatigue, and you can tip and it'll dig one of the edges in and it will divot your sheetrock or your mud. So as far as sanding goes, I do like it because I think they're 9 inches either in diameter or across the edges here. So it gives you a nice wide platform that you can easily sand across your joints, and you're less apt to dig. As long as you keep pressure on it to keep the head from wobbling on you, from tilting on you, you're less likely to dig into the sheetrock or the mud. Now, is this the end all be all? Can you just do everything with this? No, at least in my experience. Now maybe as I get more experience with it and get better with it, maybe it'll get better for me. But where I'm still having issues are in the corners. because here in the corner, you put your sander up in there, and it only gets so deep in there. You know, you've got these little rubber guards here that help stop it, and so it doesn't get fully into the corner. And I'm not throwing my palm sander away anytime soon either, because you know, you may sand your joints and everything looks good, but then upon closer inspection you may still have an edge that isn't feathered well enough, or you may have missed a ridge in your mud, and instead of getting this big sander out just for a little spot touch up, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and get my palm sander. The corners, we talked about in the previous video, sanding sponges, and that's what I use anyway for corners to finish this out and get a nice sharp corner inside there. So the end all be all no, but it's good for getting it down to near finish with some hand touch ups.